All right, it's the third period of our conversation on sports photography. Did you like what I did there with the sports pun and all? All right, let's get going. First of all, we're going to get a little bit more into some nuts and bolts stuff here, along with at least one big storytelling aspect. One is be aware of speed and blur. Sports is inherently about motion, about action, about movement from one place to another. Usually it's about speed. And so let's think about when we talked about gear, when we talked about the equipment that we shoot on, what we can do to control and manipulate how speed is portrayed. And that is shutter speed and aperture. Namely, shutter speed is what we're talking about here. A high shutter speed, which means that the shutter is opening and closing for a very tiny amount of time, means that the action is going to look frozen in time. It's going to look frozen in midair. If you have a low speed, also known as the shutter opening and staying open for longer before it shuts again, it's going to create blur, and that's going to make action look fast, actually. So blur indicates speed visually in sort of the visual hierarchy of our brains, and so we can create a sense of speed that way. So let's look at some examples. This is a high-speed shutter shot. We have our gymnast frozen in midair. This is another high-speed shutter shot from the Olympic judo competitions. Notice that both of the people are off of the ground completely, right? They're literally frozen in midair, and unfortunately the French athlete is about to have a bad day. So those are both examples of high shutter speed being very useful in sports, because you get action that normally the eye wouldn't be able to see is now frozen in midair so that we can see it. However, we can do something like this. This is a nice shot from the Winter Olympics of using useful blur, right? If you decrease the shutter speed, the more light will be let into the camera, and that means that the skier in the background are moving while the camera is still trying to process what it's seeing, which means that the skier himself is in focus, pretty well in focus, but the background is very blurry, and that tricks our brain into seeing speed and motion. The same thing here, we have champion sprinter Usain Bolt, and you notice that where you get the blur the most is arms and legs, and that helps us translate this in terms of speed and action, right? They are running, so their legs are the things that are blurry. And I really like Formula One racing, so I just decided to toss a Formula One photo in here. So this is Kimi Räikkönen, a famous Finnish driver, going around a curve. His car is focused, at least the front wheels are, and the rest of it is very blurry, giving a good indication of motion and speed. All right, so here's one more storytelling thing that I want to make sure I get into the process here. Make sure that you are paying attention before and after the game. Really important things can happen before and after the game. Don't just go to the game, just take pictures from the moment it starts to the moment it stops, and then call that a day, call that done. Sports as a spectacle are going to be bigger than just what happens during the game itself, so get there early and leave late. This is a really wonderful photograph of a Kenyan runner, long-distance runner at the Olympics, who had sort of knelt down and had a sort of moment of silence to themselves before the race. Just a very quiet, very powerful photograph. This is a photograph of a women's basketball player for UConn when they had their, I believe it was a 90-something game winning streak snapped. You can't see the facial expression, but I almost think the photo is better for it. It's a really great, powerful photograph with the context of it. Sometimes, of course, these kind of things after the game is over can become a meme. This is Michaela Maroney's photograph and her disappointment in the London 2012 Olympics for getting silver. That sort of got popular on the internet. And I've always really liked this photograph. It's Kayla Harrison, a women's judo gold medalist, winning the first gold medal in American Olympics history. Her crying a little bit on the the podium as the national anthem plays. And I've always really liked that. And this photograph has come up a lot recently because of some stuff that's in the news. You probably have seen this photograph recently. This is American runners Tommie Smith and John Carlos at the 1968 Olympic Games. And it is a very powerful photograph, but it's one that if the photographer stopped paying attention because, hey, podiums, nothing really ever exciting happens at the podium, we'll just, turn our cameras away and go take pictures of something else. You're going to miss this historical, very powerful photograph. So be ready before and after the game. All right, so back to the technical stuff. Here's a trick. If you get low to the ground and shoot upwards, so if you shoot from a low angle, it's a really easy way to make something look super epic. It's a really awesome way of making the people, the subjects in the photograph look larger than life and make the action look incredibly epic. And it's a thing that sports photographers do relatively often, right? So next time you're watching a football game or specifically a basketball game on TV, notice where the press photographers are and how they're standing on the sidelines. You're going to see a lot of people sitting down and crouching down in order to make the shots that much more larger than life. This is a cool photograph I nabbed from the internet of a photographer at a Formula One race in Malaysia, crouching down very, very low. As a matter of fact, if you notice, they got their camera just sitting on the ground in order to get those shots. I think that, Florida Gulf Coast, I think, owes some of its popularity in today's day and age to a low-angle sports shot, right? So we became the Dunk City team largely because of amazing dunks, high-angle dunks like this. But they look even more high angle when you shoot them from a really low angle. It looks like he's jumping 40 feet in the air. This is a really famous, or another really big sort of jump shot. I love how epic the leap into the end zone looks here because of the fact that the camera is on the ground. And you can tell it's on the ground because the grass right in front of the lens is very, very blurry and out of focus. Even something as simple as somebody just running, right? If you put it low to the ground, it's going to make the thing happening look that much more larger than life and epic. It also lets you work with a clear sky a lot of the times as a clean background. This is another good example. This is from the steeplechase event at the Olympic game pre-trials in Singapore. And unfortunately, in this photograph, there's somebody in the background who has completely bitten it. This works really well, too, this trick, if you are taking pictures of people who are maybe on the younger side, right? Especially if you're taking pictures of little kid sports, Little League. Here's a photo of some little kids playing cricket in Bangladesh. It makes the kids look adult size, and so it makes their actions look even more epic and cool and interesting. All right, so make sure you're including key items. There's things in sports that are going to matter visually. Think about what matters in the process for whatever sport it is, right? What is it that as the visual identifier of that sport, and how can we indicate that in the photograph? So think about how bad this photograph would have been if the ball wasn't in the picture. It would have been just a little bit of a difference if the camera angle pointed slightly more downward, and we would have lost so much of the really good context of this shot. There's lots of pictures of this. This is Reggie Bush jumping into the end zone over a Dolphins player. A couple years ago, this was a really big promotional picture for the NFL. But I'll tell you, I've never really liked this photograph compared to another photograph by the Getty photographer who was a little bit further up in the end zone. I've always liked this photograph better, and it's because you can see the pylon. You can see the fact that the ball is, the way he's jumping, it's leaping in towards a touchdown. I've always thought that this makes this photograph better than the other one. Oh, here's another good idea before I get you guys in trouble. Be very mindful of your flash. Remember, the flash on your cameras, especially your smartphones, is very bright and very direct and very harsh. If you are interrupting a sports game with your flash on your camera, you will get kicked out. If players complain about you, you will get kicked out. This is especially important for indoor sports where the flash is going to be magnified even more so. And especially in sports that require concentration. So if someone is shooting a free throw in basketball, make sure your flash is off. The best way to do that is just make sure you have automatic flash or auto flash turned off before the game even starts. And a lot of this also just involves, making sure that you are being mindful of the things that your camera does. How we compensate for the fact that we have to turn the flash off is by adjusting our shutter speed. And adjusting our shutter speed and adjusting our aperture, this is a chart of aperture, will help us adjust light and also give us a good rich sense of background. So remember, the smaller the number in the f-stop, the more that the lens is going to open, which makes us get more of that sort of rich bokeh in the background. It wouldn't be me if I didn't include a Formula One picture in this. So this is 3 Finnish drivers, back to back to back. And we have then the one closest to us is very crisp and in focus. The one in the background is blurry, but it gives us a good sense of speed and visual hierarchy. This is another great shot with bokeh. I love anytime you're trying to convey order. It works really well to have a really high aperture, because then the person who's behind our leader is even more blurry, and the person at the very back is the blurriest. It gives a good sense of visual order and visual hierarchy. Although sometimes we won't want this, right? So this is a photograph from the cycling event at the Summer Olympics in Rio. Everything is very lush in the background, beautiful green forest. So we want to get some of that forest in the picture. We don't want this to all be blurry bokeh in the background. So we'll drop our aperture, or increase our aperture number to make the size of the shutter opening smaller. Just so you know also, for those of you who are going to be shooting, I think I saw a lot in the pitches of volleyball, make sure that you are paying attention to the ISO. Remember, you're going to want to probably increase it up to a higher number in order to get some better lighting. The arenas where volleyball is played, especially at Florida Gulf Coast, are not known for having the best lighting, so you'll want to compensate with that. Here's a picture of a burning car. This is just for your own good. If you're at this point in the video, I just thought I'd throw that at you and make sure that you are still paying attention. One final lesson here, one final thing before we get to our final point. Don't fiddle. Fiddling is this phenomenon that has popped up in photography now that DSLRs have the ability to quickly assess or quickly pull up the photographs they've just taken. Fiddling is when you snap a picture and then immediately go to review settings and look at the picture you just took on your phone. You want to quickly eyeball the photos you're taking when they pop up, just to make sure that you have good focus, good zoom, all that. But you don't want to sit there and do that after every single shot, because you will miss things. This photograph cracks me up a ton, because everybody's taking the great photograph of this guy kissing his trophy, and then this one photographer is missing it because he's busy fiddling on his phone. Or fiddling on his camera, rather. And then sort of finally, you'll notice that there are times and places in sports to do that, right? So if you're taking a picture of diving, you can get the shots while they're at the top of the diving board. Once they're in the pool and everything's over, that's the time to fiddle, right? That's the time to look at your photos and make adjustments and changes. All right, that was part 3. Come back for the final in part 4, and we will talk about some of the gear you might want to get to do sports photography.